Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Sitting here Sunday morning, just got the rewatch in for this Oregon program, taking care of business largely against UCLA 34-13. Now, I watched this game live Saturday night, late night for the kid over on the East Coast, planning on recapping this game early Sunday morning with my cup of coffee. Now, I normally get up and kind of read some message boards, read some Twitter, kind of get a vibe for how the Oregon fans were feeling about a football game before I talk about it. I kind of surprised with how down a lot of the Oregon fans were on this football game, where you saw Oregon come out in the first half and play nearly flawless football until the pick six at the end of the half. Now, the second half was a different story. It was a sleepy game. It was late, not even for the kids on the East Coast, but I mean, it was late for a West Coast football game as well. The stadium was pretty much empty. My take on this is you're seeing a lot of really good teams, teams that I deem national championship contender teams, not play their best football early in the season. If you're Oregon, opening up your Big Ten conference play, winning by 21 points on the road, I think you have a lot to be excited about. And again, what Dan Lanning said in the press conference, I think is absolutely right. Where you look at this team and say, there was a lot of good that we're going to take away from this football game, but there is a hell of a lot that we still have to clean up heading into the rest of 2024. I think the Oregon fans are right. Like the expectations should be really high. The expectations are a national championship caliber team for this Oregon program. I think they played like that largely in the first half, not in the second half. And so I understand where a lot of Oregon fans are coming from. But at the end of the day, we saw a lot of top 10 teams really struggle, some outright losing at home like Ole Miss. If you're Oregon going on the road to kick off Big Ten conference play, winning by 21 points, I think you're feeling pretty comfortable where this team is at, knowing dang well that I don't think we've seen the best version of this Oregon team, but we're getting closer. Like, what are the last two games that we just saw? Oregon State and UCLA, by far the two best games we've seen Oregon play. The positive outlook here is that this Oregon team is building up. And again, there are a lot of new faces within this program. We kind of expected it to be kind of like this. Want to get into, we're going to start with the good. That's normally how I like to do it. And then talk about what Oregon needs to work on. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Oregon fans, it sounds like there are a lot of varying opinions on this football game. And I think that's the beauty of the sport that we all love. So I would love to hear from you guys. Positives you want to throw in the comment section, negatives you want to throw in the comment section, whether you flat out just disagree with how I saw this football game. Let it fly in the comment section. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas continues to mean the world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start with this Oregon defense. I think this is an Oregon defense that you are starting to see really hit its stride. Second half against Oregon State, pretty much the entire game against UCLA. And UCLA gained 172 total yards in this football game. They were 1 of 10 on first down. They only had 11 first downs in this game. This is an Oregon defense that is really starting to find its stride, really at all three levels. And I think it starts with this front seven. The Oregon fans who've been rocking with the boys going back to the summer months. My biggest not concern, but what I was most excited to see from Oregon was how dominant this new front seven could be. You know, I think Dan Lanning looked at 2023 and said, hey, we are a really good football team, obviously, but where did we potentially fall short of being that national championship contender? I think it largely was being difference makers in the front seven. You're continuing to see that. And I think, again, Derek Harmon continues to be an absolute monster for Oregon, but you're seeing some other guys start to find their form as well. Jordan Birch looks like a difference maker. Jamari Caldwell looks like a difference maker, especially some of the guys on the inside. Like last year, it never really seemed like you had game records on the inside. I think you're starting to see that from this Oregon front seven as we go through 2024. The young edge rushers are still progressing and taking strides. And then this Oregon secondary, again, it's really hard to throw in the secondary. Now, you saw Nico Reed get picked on a little bit at the cornerback spot. I think Nico Reed's been pretty dang good for most of the 2024 year. And if you're starting at cornerback for this Oregon team or getting significant playing time, you know you're really good because the amount of talent in this cornerback room, is phenomenal for Oregon. And UCLA threw for 125 yards. So I really leave this football game saying not many concerns about this Oregon defense. They had a shaky first drive in this football game, largely dominated the rest of the football game on defense, forcing turnovers, a lead on third down, 1 for 10 for UCLA. You're seeing this Oregon defense become national championship caliber. Now, this Oregon offense, you are seeing national championship caliber flashes, but you want to see it for a full game. Now, you look at that first half, largely flawless. Like UCLA just did not really have many answers for what Oregon was doing. Again, my biggest takeaway is this offensive line, particularly on the inside. I think you figured it out. Like moving Poncho back to center, Nishad at guard. That's the best version of this offensive line that we've seen. And I think it goes back to what you saw against Boise State when Nishad got some work, and then obviously against Oregon State, and then against UCLA. The biggest concern we had was this offensive line coming together. I think Elite Terry is doing a really nice job with this offensive line. I think they're getting better now, with a caveat that I would like to see a little bit more dominance in the run game for Oregon. You look at when Oregon's been playing their best football, it's when they can run the football efficiently and stay on schedule. This was the biggest problem for this Oregon offense during the first two games of the season, where you're getting into many of these second and third and longs, where this is not where this Oregon offense wants to operate. This Oregon team wants to be on schedule. They want to be second and short, third and short, moving the chains, going fast. When you have those runs that go for no gain or 1 yard, you're looking at second and 9. You can tell that's when this Oregon offense, is a little bit more uncomfortable. So for the run game, I know this group can block it up. Like you saw it against Oregon State. You've seen the flashes of them imposing their will. You probably want to see that a little bit more. And that's probably one of the takeaways that we're going to be looking at as you go to Friday night against Michigan State. I think secondly, I still think Evan Stewart needs to be more involved. And again, I get that Tez Johnson is Dylan Gabriel's guy. And quite frankly, I'm a huge fan of Oregon having their guy that they love. Like Tez Johnson being that difference maker when the moment's the biggest, or when you're in the red zone or you need a third down conversion. That's good. I mean, talk about how we just talked about Georgia. Georgia doesn't have that. Georgia has a lot of talented pass catchers, but they don't really have that guy. And so Tez Johnson being that guy for Oregon, like I'm not getting up here and saying Tez Johnson shouldn't be that guy that's leading this team in targets. That being said, I think what can make this Oregon team, specifically on offense, kind of take that next step is getting everybody incorporated in this offense, because you have so many difference makers within this Oregon offense. You got to be able to attack defenses in a lot of different ways. And I feel like at times it's a little bit too one dimensional to Tez Johnson. I know it sounds crazy. I'm asking Oregon and Dylan Gabriel to maybe lighten the workload up for Tez Johnson, even though I think he's the best wide receiver on this football team. But you have a guy like Evan Stewart, who the one game that Evan Stewart had more than 5, he went for 112 yards against Boise State. I think Evan Stewart can be that guy that's working vertically down the field. I think Evan Stewart is a top 10 wide receiver in the country, and I would like to see Oregon get him more involved. When you can get Evan Stewart going, you go back to his freshman year at Texas A&M, there aren't many more wide receivers that are better than Evan Stewart when he's incorporated in offense. And so I think that's one of my knocks is I think you just want to see Oregon make sure they're getting as many of these playmakers involved, because the more multidimensional you can be, the more dangerous this Oregon team is. So on offense, again, the first half was brilliant. Like it looked very, very easy. And in the second half, I think it's worth noting in the second half, you had what, 4 drives? One went for a touchdown. One was a third down play where they had an excellent play call to Kenny Sadiq on like a delayed screen that got batted down at the line of scrimmage. That play probably goes first down, probably goes for a big chunk play. And we know when Oregon gets those chunk plays, those first downs, they start kind of cruising a little bit on offense. If that play hits, we might be having a different conversation about this Oregon offense in the second half. Now, the one mistake we saw Dylan Gabriel made, it was bad. Again, I think it was an aspect of Tez Johnson's my guy. I'm going to Tez Johnson in the red zone, where it wasn't there. And you saw Tez Johnson slip on that play, but Oregon had certainly no business, especially Dylan Gabriel. It was kind of one of those those freelance plays where Dylan Gabriel's flushing out to his right. Wants Tez Johnson was kind of running an in-breaking route into the red zone and then was going to kind of go to the scramble drill and run to the boundary, try to create some separation. Tez Johnson slips. Dylan Gabriel throws it. Obviously, Brian Addison, former Oregon Duck, takes it to the house. Look, that's like, how many times has Dylan Gabriel put the ball in harm's way this football season? Almost never. Like, he's allowed to make some of those mistakes. Now, you don't want to see it in the red zone and then lead to a pick six. That's a 14-point swing. Oregon should be scoring a touchdown going into half. Instead, you're giving up 7 points at the end of the half. You can't make those mistakes when you're playing for a Big Ten championship or you're playing Ohio State in a couple of weeks. That being said, I don't expect Dylan Gabriel to make many of those mistakes because we haven't really seen it. Was it Oregon's best game? No, but I thought you saw that national championship caliber team in the first half. You didn't see it in the second half. Again, it's college football. This was in a super late game where the crowd was pretty much empty in the second half. Oregon should be responsible for bringing their own energy coming out of half. Dan Lanning would be the first one to tell you that. I'm not going to read as much into the second half in terms of what we saw. My biggest takeaways here, want to see some more of these offensive weapons get involved in the offense. And then secondly, I think this defense is really finding its form. Again, you go to the second half of Oregon State, and then you go to this full 4 quarters against UCLA. I get UCLA's offense is not very good. They had 172 total yards. Like, that's how it should look for this Oregon our Oregon defense. We'll close it out there. We'll probably dive deeper into this football game a little bit earlier in the week. I'm going to get a rewatch in this game, cut up some plays, talk about what we just saw. Now we'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.